Welcome back. This is the afternoon session of SDSU Swine Day. So for the next 20, 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk through some of my research program. So let me get started with my slides here. All right, so my name is Ryan Samuel. I've been here at SDSU about 4 years. So here I'm an assistant professor and extension swine specialist. I supervise 2 master students, 1 PhD student, as well as the off-site wean to finish barn, which is south of Brookings. So today I'm going to talk about some of my research and extension programming. So my research program looks at ways to improve production efficiency of growing and finishing swine. This starts with my background in nutrition. I did my master's and PhD at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. So I question and ask, are there any specific nutrients or classes of nutrients that can improve productivity? Then working with colleagues in the Department of Ag and Biosystems Engineering, what are the specific elements in the environment that can be changed or altered to improve productivity? Similarly, how do manage decisions in the barn impact the productivity of growing and finishing swine? So as a nutritionist, it occurs to me that we know quite a lot about feeding the right nutrients in the right quantities and at the right time for these animals. But what about non-nutritive additions to the diet? So those would be like feed additives. So these feed additives are included in low quantities in the diets, but can have significant benefits on productivity beyond the basics of nutritional requirements. Some of these benefits include improvements in growth, feed efficiency, and or feed intake. These improvements lower the cost of production, but the influence of feeding and environmental conditions cannot be ignored. So feed additives must work with the variables in commercial production conditions, and so that's why we look at these at commercial facilities, commercial research facilities such as our off-site research barn. So one of the type of nutritional product that I look at is trace minerals. Trace minerals are nutritive additions to the diet. Furthermore, trace minerals are required in the diet as essential cofactors for biological processes within the body, including energy production and for the immune system and for growth and development, as well as protection from any oxidative stress. And so these inclusions of trace minerals are important and required. And so continuing that, trace minerals are nutritive, and it is well recognized that deficiencies in these minerals lead to reductions in growth performance or at lower levels, deformation of the animal body. Therefore, animal diets are supplemented with trace minerals. Certainly, the longest history and the most common inclusions of trace minerals would be the inorganic forms. Organic forms, which are so called because of the organic ligand associated with the trace mineral element, have a shorter history, but arguably more research. So the necessity of trace minerals for their importance as cofactors of cellular enzymes and transcription factors cannot be ignored. The availability of organic minerals has demonstrated that form matters. Greater bioavailability of organic trace minerals is better for the environment because more of the mineral is retained by the body. Modern feed processing techniques is able to release more of the mineral already present in the feedstuff. And so these innate forms of trace minerals become important in feed formulation. Some nutrients and additives included in a complete ration may be susceptible to oxidation or inhibition by free metals released by the inorganic salt forms of trace minerals. So these negative interactions may be reduced using organic trace minerals. And so in this figure, you can see that the effects of the inhibition of enzymes such as phytases, or you can have the oxidation and with protective antioxidants in the feedstuffs, in the diets, and those interactions thereof of those trace mineral supplementations. So this paper by Santos et al. Observed that the proteinates were consistently and significantly less inhibitory than a majority of the other sources. Verified for E. coli, phytases, for iron and zinc, as well as copper. So on this figure, the top line represents the iron proteinate. And so you can see it's consistently the top line in all of those graphs. And what that graph is demonstrating is that as you increase the concentration of that iron proteinate in the solution that they're testing these at, you see less inhibition of the phytoenzyme, ronozyme, or natriphos compared to the other trace minerals that they used. So as a postdoc, I was able to work with Professor Mahan of The Ohio State University. And these are some of the observations that he shared when I was able to work with him. So one is that dietary trace mineral recommendations appear to be greater than the actual requirements of the pig. This is especially true for diets with phytase and when we're ignoring the innate trace minerals, as it does not completely identify the mineral requirements. So again, those innate trace minerals and the importance thereof are something that he would emphasize and tell us to consider. Arguably, the calcium and phosphorus relationship is quite well established in that the ratio is critical. With that in mind and respected, dietary additions of calcium and phosphorus are possible that do not result in differences in pig performance. However, the macromineral additions impact the availability of microminerals. So we could put it as the common vernacular, so one might say, well, some is good, but more is better, except when it comes to macrominerals and microminerals, arguably. So meeting more closely those requirements is much more efficient. Likewise, as discussed earlier, mineral additions can impact the performance of enzymes, both endogenous and exogenous. Dr. Mahan would say that the critical element for nursery pigs is zinc, and the zinc requirement must be met for optimum growth performance. Dr. Mahan's suggestions that low inclusions of the trace minerals are possible due to carryover from the sow or from the contribution of the innate trace minerals. The trace mineral requirements of healthy finisher pigs are actually quite low, as discovered by Dr. Mahan. In experiments with healthy pigs, adding trace minerals at 50% of the NRC requirements was possible. No effects on the animal health, no effects on carcass differences. The modern sow has a high demand for all the nutrients to produce large litters of healthy pigs, and the advantages of trace minerals were most notable to Dr. Mahan, considering the positive effects on the gestating and lactating sows. So we'll talk a bit about trace mineral research that has been conducted here at SDSU. So we know that pharmacological levels of zinc and copper is a recognized strategy to improve nursery pig growth performance. Dr. Cromwell observed that tribasic copper chloride was equally effective as copper sulfate for nursery pig growth performance. Similarly, at the University of Illinois, they demonstrated that tribasic copper chloride improved growth performance due to the intestinal health of the pigs, including benefits for fat metabolism. So the trial that we did at the SDSU offsite barn investigated two sources of tribasic copper chloride. The first was a newer source as compared to an established tribasic copper chloride source. Therefore, we had the 4 dietary treatments as listed there. The diets were standard commercial diet formulations composed primarily of corn, soy protein, and other commonly included commodities, fed in 4 dietary phases to the nursery trial. This study was completed at the offsite wean to finish barn. Pigs were housed at 26 head per pen with access to a 5-hole feeder and 2 cup waterers per pen. Treatment diets were delivered by the FeedLogic robot. Pigs were weighed weekly in conjunction with measurements of feed and water disappearance. So the addition of tribasic copper chloride improved the average daily gain of nursery pigs. There were differences in pig performance observed between levels of the SAM tribasic copper chloride or between sources providing 150 ppm copper. Again, no differences in observed. Pigs were fed diets containing tribasic copper chloride at 150 ppm, and they grew significantly faster than pigs fed the control diet. But again, not different from the pigs fed the 100 ppm inclusion of SAM tribasic copper chloride. So except for the first week of the trial, 100 ppm SAM tribasic copper chloride numerically outperformed the pigs fed the control diets. Furthermore, from the weeks of days 21 to 28 and days 28 to 35, the pigs fed 100 ppm SAM tribasic copper chloride performed identical to pigs fed 150 ppm of Intellibon tribasic copper chloride. So overall, there were no differences in average daily feed intake that approached significance. So the suggestion was that the increases in growth were a result of possibly improved gut health and the possibility of the increased ability to metabolize dietary fats, as described by Espinoza from the University of Illinois. So these tribasic copper chloride sources had similar improvements in average daily gain. And this may indicate an opportunity to reduce the amount of SAM tribasic copper chloride needed in later nursery phases, which would save money and reduce the environmental copper loading. So as we heard this morning from David Clizer, he's been working and looking at DDGS inclusions in diets. So this is an article that was from earlier this year, the Farm Journal's Pork's Up and Coming Leaders feature. And so it featured, again, David's work and looking at understanding amino acids in diets with dried distiller grains with solubles. So David's research is focused on amino acid nutrition within these diets with DDGS. The research allowing for greater understanding of how swine nutrient requirements could change due to the inclusion of DDGS in diets, and therefore allow producers to make better economic decisions how to feed their pigs. Special thanks to Christian Farms for their contributions to this research and their efforts in helping David continue to understand amino acid interactions with DDGS diets. So as discussed this morning, the results of the first experiment indicated that increasing tryptophan to lysine ratio in diets containing 40% DDGS increased the feed intake, and that resulted in increased average daily gain and final body weights. However, the pigs fed a standard corn soybean meal diet had improved performance compared to the diets containing DDGS. Furthermore, increasing the tryptophan to lysine ratio had the greatest impact on average daily gain during the growing period. However, this data would suggest that the SID tryp to lysine ratio of at least 18% is needed in late finishing to ensure adequate growth performance. So again, that's a summation thus far of the research that's been going on within my lab. Again, so I've got a new master's student, and she's going to be looking at and continuing on in this trace mineral area of research. The other part that I work in is extension, so as an extension swine specialist. So we heard a little bit this morning from Angie about the We Care initiative and the We Care principles. And so these are the commitments that producers have on these ethical principles. Again, to produce safe food, promote and protect animal well-being, ensure practices to protect public health, safeguard natural resources, provide a work environment that is safe, and contribute to a better quality of life in our communities. As we heard, there's been a growing interest among food chain consumers and the general public with the way food is produced. And recognizing that they must address these concerns and better position the industry's track record of responsibility, the pork industry leaders launched the We Care initiative a few years back. So the We Care initiative seeks ongoing improvement in the pork industry's production practices, including building upon and promoting to those outside the industry its strong record of responsible farming. Part of My program on extension is leading the PQA Plus training and certifications. So this is a program that was first launched in 1989, first called the Pork Quality Assurance. Quickly became the pork industry's leading educational program. Over the years, the PQA program has expanded and evolved, incorporating the latest scientific knowledge and production methods. And then in recent years, the site assessment component has designed to evaluate animal care practices on farm has been included. So there are two parts to the PQA Plus program. TQA, or the Transport Quality Assurance Program, is a clear demonstration of how the pork industry promotes and implements responsible practices when handling and transporting pigs. So not as a result of regulation or a mandate, but rather as an acknowledgement that adhering to a good production practices is a good business decision and is the right thing to do. So this spirit of continuous improvement is the mindset that has long been embraced by the pork industry stakeholders. And it is this commitment to continuous improvement and striving to be better that has built confidence among industry consumers and stakeholders in the program's good production practices. The desire for continuous improvement has caused National Pork Board and the PQA Task Force to examine the PQA Plus program and the TQA program every 3 years, modifying the program to reflect the needs of producers, caretakers, partners, and the industry. So it's important in this training that everyone who works with pigs on a daily basis gets and achieves their PQA Plus certification. Of course, in the time of COVID-19, that has become more of an issue to do so. This was traditionally taught in face-to-face programming. There are now virtual options available, and so if we can do this via Zoom or other virtual platforms, there are also online options available. So if you are in need of your PQA Plus or TQA certification renewals, you can contact either myself or Bob Toller, and we can set you up through online to take the modules and complete your recertification. So we know the talk of this year 2020 has been COVID-19. It's certainly consumed the majority of our attention and has highlighted the importance of biosecurity. So on the plus side, we could say COVID-19 reduced travel and therefore may have reduced the threat of foreign animal disease to the United States. However, it is important that we may remain vigilant against the threat of foreign animal disease. One of the ways to help prevent foot and mouth disease, classical swine fever, and African swine fever is by developing and following an enhanced biosecurity plan. So under the Secure Pork Supply Initiative, there is the recommendation that each producer, each site have an enhanced biosecurity plan and sharing that with your state officials. So should a foreign animal disease or suspected foreign animal disease arrive, when that premises is infected, the area around it is called the infected zone, approximately 3 kilometers or 1.8 miles. The infected zone and the buffer zone together make up a control area of about 10 kilometers total. And a lot of state and federal resources will go into taking care of this infected premises. Outside of the control zone will be the surveillance zone, and outside of the surveillance zone, there will be the free area. And you've got all those sites that are not infected, but they are now affected. And so this is where developing and filing a secure pork supply plan is beneficial, where your state official can work with you to help you move hogs or move feed, because as the first step in the process, a 72-hour movement hold will occur. So there'll be no movement of animals for that period of time. And so the sooner that we can get back to business and remain and back to some continuity of business would be the best. So Bill Even from National Pork Board said recently that this web-based technology solution called AgView will come online on November 9th. is the date that I heard, being able for producers to start entering data. He quotes, the quote here says, it adds to a new level of practical benefits to the secure pork supply, and the software will provide near real-time disease status to facilitate disease traceback. With producer permission, AgView can quickly share with animal health officials the type and size of farms, animal movements, positive tracing, and lab results. It integrates with database systems, and an Excel upload option is available. So if anyone is using AgView now, you will have received this notification that there'll be two branches of it. So there'll be the AgView for producers to enter their data. Again, coming the original date mid-November, and then again, as I had heard, November 9th, launching that available. So the goal of the Secure Pork Supply Plan is to provide a business continuity plan for pork premises that are affected by movement controls, but not infected with foot and mouth disease, classical swine fever, or African swine fever as foreign animal diseases. In an actual outbreak, of course, decisions will be made by responsible regulatory officials based on the unique characteristics of each outbreak. Participation in the Secure Pork Supply Plan is voluntary, but definitely highly recommended. And so if you have questions, please contact us here at SDSU, and we can talk through the development of such a plan. Switching gears again, one of the other things that I get to be involved with here at SDSU is Swine Club. So Crystal Levesque and I are the Swine Club advisors. And Swine Club, the SDSU Swine Club, is a student-led organization dedicated to generating interest, building understanding, and providing opportunities for growth in the swine industry. The students in this organization are involved in a variety of swine center activities, including service to the South Dakota Pork Producers Association, as well as... Apologize for the connection drop there. So I was just going to talk about the Swine Club. This is something that Crystal Levesque and I are the Swine Club advisors. It's a student-led organization dedicated to generating interest, building understanding, and providing opportunities for growth in the swine industry. Students in this organization are involved in a variety of swine center activities, including service to the South Dakota Pork Producers Association, and participation in field trips to area swine producers and the allied industry. They also serve as assistants during research trials and work at the Swine Education and Research Facility. Previous experience with swine is not necessary in order to participate in the club, and that's one of the benefits and enjoyments of being part of the club as an advisor. The students from this club come from a variety of backgrounds and contribute to learning about and discussions in the swine industry. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. And so those are some of the types of research and extension projects that I have going on here at SDSU, and I appreciate your attention for today. So that concludes my presentation. I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Jane Christopher Hennings and then Dr. Ben House, and they're going to talk through some updates from the ADDITIVES and the Vet Science Department.